time, my mind is filled with thoughts. This is our 8th time to hold such forums successfully. It's been 10 years since the very first one. And for me, because of this forum, I was able to have access to different thoughts and practitioners from around the world, especially from the third world. And what I learned from them, the thoughts and experiences will benefit me for a lifetime. I'm extremely grateful for all three teachers of mine, Professor Dai, Professor Wen, and Professor Lau, who would also speak. They give me and my colleagues this opportunity to change the trajectory of our life and our thoughts. But it's worth mentioning that it made me honestly and proudly to take a stand of the subaltern, be committed to this, and think, act, and try to change this world. I would also like to thank our friends and colleagues, old and new. Our mutual encouragement and mutual support is a prerequisite that led us to what we are today. Today is July the 19th, and exactly 18 years ago, Professor Wen and Professor Lau established a rural construction institute in Hebei province. I was lucky to be a volunteer back then. And from that time on, I was able to participate in this movement. And this year, rural construction has been written into authoritative documents of the central government, and it has become a widely participated movement from the society in general. I think this is very heartening and very reassuring. And it gives us new requirements for us who have participated in this movement for nearly 2 decades. Compared with the past, the world today is different in that the form of capitalism and the landscape of the whole world have taken on great changes. This is our evolving. So our thoughts and our actions should also adapt accordingly. And to put it more precisely, that means that the world we're in, the ecology around us, the world around us is ever evolving. Well, there are the ecology of the nature, the social ecology, natural ecology, and our mental ecology. There's 3 ecologies. Capitalism has an influence on nature and on the society, where it starts from influencing each one of us, each individual. Its life is sustained from our action, and it draws all our life as its nutrient that sustains, that fuels it. So we need to create conditions that would enable changes around us. I think this is precisely what our rural construction movements and our forum are striving for. We do not necessarily need to strive for direct changes or change of the individual, but we shall go hand in hand and create conditions that enable changes, where changes, revolutions can be made possible, and make all the 3 ecologies one. This is where we have to work going forward. Our great thanks to everyone, and we hope that you will continue to keep an eye on our activities. Thank you. Then we would like to invite Professor Wen to give his closing speech. Thank you for mentioning the day of 2003 when they founded in a village in Hebei province an institute for rural construction where working people can be educated free of charge. At that time, we hope to propose that subalterns or just the common people should have a way to express their voices, their demands, their needs, and form their own voice. And this may take a long time and a long process. I remember back then, Professor Lau organized us to understand situations of developing countries like India or countries in Latin America. And they began to understand why Chinese people in the rural areas have a weak voice. And this is common to all third world countries. Back then, we all say another world is possible. It is our common pursuit, common aspiration. And then we notice that no matter what we do, what our emotions are, we could not form a system of discourse that enable us to have a voice in the general dialogue of this world. And this, in turn, this world cannot represent our interest and cater to our pursuits. So back then, we participated in a great number of discussions, no matter it's in Africa, Latin America, South Asia, or Southeast Asia. In our discussions, we could only use discourses of centralized Western dominated discourses. Without these, we cannot express ourselves. Even like China, as we have with a history of thousands years and a very complete system of script and language. Even as a nation, as us, we cannot express how they become what they are today. I've always thought that I was not a very capable scholar. Despite that, I was charged or driven, and I understand we have formed a voice of the subaltern and a voice, a discourse of the history of our country. In recent years, we began to accept Western education, arts, literature, etc. And after that, we should not just forget or ignore or neglect our own discourse or our history. This is simply not permissible. This is a form of destruction of this country, this nation. If we don't know where we come from, we won't know where we will go. So the more we participate in international comparative study, the more knowledge we have in this regard, the more we feel that our most challenging task now is to form a form of discourse or expression different from the dominant, the mainstream, based on our own unique situations. Without this, it's impossible to create an alternative. So during this process, we continue to engage in some rather preliminary exploration of discourse. And through our 8 sessions of the South-South Forum, we were able to do some of this. But we brought up the idea of this forum with Professor Lau. It is our hope that they want to distill the experiences of the global South countries into innovations in terms of thoughts and theory. Only in this way can they conduct dialogue with the dominating West. The discussion today about capital is obviously something from a discourse from the Western discourse system from Marxism. And then it is always a prominent topic in recent history in the West. But how capital was formed, what is its nature, how it evolved, how it exerted its influence on everything. Does this have to be connected to the dominating Western thoughts, and they have to be exactly the same with what they express? Well, so far, as I say, our discussion about whatever ism kind of thing and whatever zation, this kind of nouns, they are not something that we want to agree or disagree with. What we want to say is that they do not, these isms and zations were not born in developing countries. Only after their creation by some others, they were wrapped up into this kind of nouns or concepts. But they haven't really go to great and careful details into how they became what they are today. Thanks to our 8 sessions of this forum, they began to have some inspirations or deeper thoughts. Like in the beginning, in the earlier sessions, we talk about these in some concepts in English. And many of the participants found this ridiculous and unacceptable. And even in the case that they try to wrap up Eastern experience in Western discourses are not acceptable. This should be quite miserable and pathetic. And now we brought up this 3SS principle. It's a fundamental principle. First, if developing countries do not have hold of its resource sovereignty over resources, then all isms are out of the question. Like I said, like Ecuador and some other Latin American countries, when their resources are still controlled by other powers, there's no use talking about these isms. And if they do not grab this in their own hands, that they can convert these resources into their own capital, they cannot talk about development. And they can no longer talk about a developing country. They're just what is left over of colonization. In this sense, they do not have their self-proclaimed independent sovereignty. Although they just copied Western freedom and democracy, and they have free election, what have they do with their country? Can they get back their sovereignty over resources? No. So even if through violent revolution, it's still positive. For example, that of the revolution of Chavez, only with grabbing hold of more than 70% of their resources, they can able to develop their country. They can support their public finance, or else people in the slums and the general public are in a very dire situation. So our very first principle is resources sovereignty. And then we say that only with this sources sovereignty we can have social solidarity, where people form a system or institution that safeguard their interests. Without the prerequisites or conditions for this, they cannot take hold of their sources sovereignty and establish their own system. They can only copy Western slogans, and they cannot really be an independent nation themselves. So we put emphasis on the social solidarity and not other kind of solidarity, especially not the kind of solidarity as emphasized by Western NGOs. We can see that active NGOs in developing countries are all backed up by Western multinational powers. They aren't really independent. Their slogans, documents do not really serve those countries where they are located.
The multinational companies are everywhere. So if you didn't gain the sovereignty through the resources sovereignty, there is no point. Or we can say that the even it has certain meanings, it is not positive. So now with the sovereignty of the above two, we have the third sovereignty, which is the sustainability safety, sustainable safety for developing countries. If you don't have a social chaos, if you can sustain the low income groups safety, that is already a dream come true. This is not a dream for the developing to be this is not a dream about to become a developed country, but to sustain the lowest standard for the low income people to sustain their lives, their livelihood. So for these developing countries, what is our developing experience? What is the lessons that we can learn from? We still facing a problem. So after eight South Forum, have we accomplished what we are aiming at? No, we haven't. We still have to keep working on to promote the developing countries' sovereign experience exchange. So what we were saying that in the beginning, in the very beginning, that if you have experience but you don't have your own discourse, then you cannot have a place in our forum. So that's why please understand that are we we don't like to sustain this kind of all kind of um, speech. We would like the friends from all different developing countries. We hope you can offer your own experience and to speak it in your own words, so that we can really exchange the experience on the south in the global south to benefit every countries in the south. So that's all I want to offer. But if I made some mistake, I welcome every kind of comments. Thank you, Professor Wen. We have a limited time, so the next speaker is Professor Wen. Sorry, Professor Dai, Professor Dai Jinghua, to give her finishing the closure remarks of the South Forum. So in Xiaohui's speech, he mentioned that this is the eighth South Forum, and now so fast after 1 month, it's already the last session, and this also give me a very strong emotional impact. And I feel I feel it's because there are like 20 years pass by, and China, both China and the world, is going through a very rapid change. And in the very beginning, I advocated and also joined in the South South Forum. At that time, sorry, there is a very this Wi-Fi problem. And at that time, I was very passionate because South South Forum for me is not just a speech, it's not just a discourse, but to listen. So for me, the most important thing about South South Forum is to be able to listening to the voices from the global south. So earlier when Xiaohui mentioned 20 years has passed by, I also it occurred to me that 20 years ago with Professor Lau, we were trying to be able to gathering around all the actionists, all the thinkers from the global south, and to be able to accomplish something. So South South Forum was part of this scheme, was our practice of this idea. And in the beginning, what we were most stressing on was to let China to let the global south to also hear what China has to say. So today, I realized that after 20 years, what the Chinese scholars, when Chinese scholars listening to it become more important for Chinese scholars to listen to the voices from abroad, because in the 100 years in this 100 years of the colonization, we share the same destiny. In front of the catastrophe, the crisis, we are trying to find a way to revive, and also to live. So when China, in some way, to become an exception, almost the only exception to the Western world, China, in some, kind of has the so-called right to join the globalization, and also a kind of the right to negotiate. China has what kind of new role China has to take, and China in with the old global South, what China has, what kind of responsibility China has in the global South, and also what China can absorb, what type of courage, what type of experience China can absorb from the global South is also a question. So during this 20 years of questioning, now we have some new some this kind of it become more and more imminent. So this what I wanted to share, what I feel when I'm going through this kind of emotional impact. So, and also in this pandemic, we also witnessed a global a globe this kind of globalization that no one can be left alone. So we saw this kind of interconnect between every individuals. So our forum's importance also was also shown in this pandemic, and itself already conveys lots of meanings to every one of us. So in the inauguration, I already mentioned that as a Chinese scholar, I feel very strongly that on one side is the globalization and its depths that no one can get out of. And on the other side, we can see the in different countries, in different class, people in front of the same destiny, but they all go through different destinies, go through different individual destinies. So in this kind of under these circumstances, the role of the nation state and also the different people from different classes bring lots of problems to us and force us to really face it. It's not just a response from the theory or from the thoughts. It's more like the process of practice. So I would like to I would like to bring up again my own idea, my own experience that to some extent we are facing an unprecedented global situation. We are facing after 100 years of China's developmentalism. Finally, China changed. After China changed its appearance and destiny, where are we going as the country? And where is the world is going? How can we reply to this
How do we respond in this capitalist global system? And how do we deal with this technological changes that is led and imposed by the capital? How do we deal with this restructuring of labor and production? When faced with this, we have to admit that our existing knowledge, to a great extent, are useless, are no longer useful. When faced with this reality, we're now into a new form of ignorance. And I believe pursuit of knowledge can only come from practice, from people's practice of self-rescuing from suffering. So now solidarity among global South countries, and therefore, although scholarly communications on this forum is about to end temporarily, I still hope that we will remain in this lofty cause and continue with it. Thank you, Professor Dai. And then next to speak is Margaret Jolly, one of our most important organizers of this session of the forum. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tsui Margaret Jolly, and I'm a teacher at Southwest University. I have been involved in the planning and coordination of this forum since 2011. Many international friends often say to me, I'm so impressed that you have run 8 consecutive sessions under such difficult conditions. I said that this kind of perseverance comes from 2 traditions. One is the tradition of Chinese scholars, materially poor but take the world as their responsibility, being the first to bear hardships and the last to enjoy comfort, so to speak. And the world is not only China, but also the whole world. The other is internationalism. That is the belief in communism and the pursuit of the liberation of human beings all over the world. Therefore, this forum is based on solidarity of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with the subaltern people as the backbone. This 8th South-South Forum on Sustainability started on June the 15th and continued for more than a month until today, with almost 1 session per day, with 12 dialogues, 18 lectures, 4 workshops, the session of opening ceremony and the closing ceremony. So a total of 36 webinars were held with 108 speakers from 36 countries. This year, for the first time, we provide simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for all sessions, which will be edited into 3 language editions, that is Chinese, English, and Spanish, and be uploaded to the website of the Global University for Sustainability, Lingnan University YouTube, and they just launched the foreign language channel of Guoren Global EU on Bilibili, a very popular social media in China. In the process of organizing this forum, we gather our ideas, collect the thoughts of the people, and bring benefits to the people, thus breeding hope. That is, farewell to capitalism and march on the road to socialism, where no one is left behind. The next year, it will be held from July the 7th to August the 11th. We look forward to your participation.
Thank you to my two co-moderators, Dr. Yan Xiaohui and Professor Tsui, and many thanks to Professor Wen Tejun and Professor Dai Jinghua for their speeches. They have co-organized the South-South Forum since its very beginning 10 years ago, and they are core founding members of the Global University for Sustainability. We have set this year's forum's theme to be the politics of hope. Why do we stress hope? Because there is simply too much despair around us, with the pandemic, with the financial breakdown, with the climate collapse. But we have not talked only of hope. We talk of the politics of hope. We have gained much insight from the many distinguished speakers at this forum. I would like to refer to some of them in my closing remarks. Professor Wang Hui, a few days ago, hit on something which I believe to be very important for our understanding of the politics of hope in catastrophic times. In his dialogue with Paul Bove on the politics of hope and love, Professor Wang Hui started by invoking Lu Xun's reflection on hope, which is inevitable whenever doomsday is looming near. Our Chinese audience is surely familiar with Lu Xun's saying that despair, like hope, is as vain. So, when people are faced with relentless forces that drive them into despair, shattering the world, depriving them of any meaning of life, they may sink into despair, feel powerless, helpless, paralyzed. Yet, the pain and suffering simply will not end with despair and paralysis. Thus, instead of being reduced to a complete lethargy, there is response into action. So, the thinking of a politics of hope in catastrophic times is also a thinking of a politics of action. Action emerges from a deeper level than an epistemological question that asks what is to be done. When we say hope is the courage to go on, the resilience that refuses to surrender, we are referring to this level, that of the energy of life to surge forth. One vivid expression by the Zapatistas is, enough is enough. In other words, hope and action cannot be separated. The breaking into action is an assertion of our refusal to allow our fate to be sealed or to be sacrificed by those who regard us as expendable, who continually produce and reproduce their domination over us. In fact, hope and action constitute a sort of dialectics mutually generating one another. Hope breaks into action in response to hostile forces, and the entering into action further opens up a field of possible actions. I would relate to some insights from Vinod Rainer, who promoted the People's Science Movement in India and played a key role in the first two South-South forums. He was a mountaineer. He said, when you watch the mountain you want to climb from afar, you do not seem to see any path. But once you start actually climbing with hands and feet planted on the mountain, a path starts to present itself before you. Even in the case that the path finally ends up in dead end, you will not be just shattered by this failure. For you see, it is in action that the impossibility can open towards possibility. This is the mutual engendering of hope and action. So hope speaks against certainty. In one sense, one can say that the objective condition of the possibility of hope is uncertainty, contingency, and chance. They are the singular events that play a significant role in the production of reality as processes of becoming. Thus, subjectively, hope requires the courage, the resilience, the perseverance to act in the belief that however dismal our future may seem, we are not locked in determinism, and no science can be conclusive about our fate. Even if we are really doomed sometime in the future, this is not reason enough for us to do nothing, to resist actions of those who exploit our lives and relentlessly plunder nature for profits in the form of rent. This powerful elite simply gives up any pretense that they share a common future with the rest of the world. Many of our speakers have said, there is no capitalism that does not exploit and plunder human and nature. Many of our speakers have debated how to move on the arduous path to socialism and communism. We have gained many insights from the dialogue among Professor Harvey, Professor Hudson, and Professor Wen tonight. These dialogues and debates will continue. I thank again the over 100 speakers at this forum who are present today in the Zoom room. Many of them are present today in the Zoom room and who have presented their frank thoughts during the forum. Last but not least, I would like to thank the whole organizing team. While we are organizing the South-South Forum, which ran for 5 weeks in a row, the team is multitasked, producing video programs on Toutiao and Xiaohui, such as Professor Hudson's lectures on the history of super-imperialism, moderated by Professor Wen. We also produce video programs every day or every other day on Bilibili. And we co-produce and translate books, for example, Professor Hudson's Super Imperialism, the 3rd edition, and the book, The Destiny of Civilization. This could not have been accomplished without the dedication of the team members working for hope and action for another possible world. I would also like to thank our interpreters. We have a team of 15 interpreters for Spanish and English interpreting, and 4 persons for the Chinese and English interpreting team. So you can calculate how many hours of interpreting they have taken up in the last 5 weeks, plus all the preparation work before each session. As Gustavo Esteva said in his inaugural lecture on June the 15th, it is the friendship that sustains communities with love and also generating surprises. Indeed, Gustavo has quoted from the indigenous communities, and most impressive is the philosophy and practice that every I is a we. I would like to end by a quotation that Professor Daijing Hua and I love, a quotation from Che Guevara, that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. The catastrophic times demand that we are true revolutionaries to rescue the common fate of our communities and that of humanity and of Mother Earth. And the politics of hope, the politics of action, cannot be but guided by a great feeling of love. So thank you all, and see you next year at the 9th South-South Forum for Sustainability. Thank you.